Hello, curling fans, and welcome back to another edition of the Broom Brothers, the official podcast of the curling group and the Grand Slam of Curling. Had a great chat with Matt Dunstone and Danny Casper last week, so if you missed that, go check it out. But now we are here. The brothers are reunited to talk curling, some big events, I would say kind of the first big events of the curling calendar in the book. We're going to talk about that. We're going to tee up the Co-op Tour Challenge coming up in Nisku, Alberta. I'm wearing my Nisku sweater here. But before we get to that, Robbie, let's check in. How are you?
I'm well. I'm not going to lie. It was nice to get our feet wet again in London. That was a great trip, a great event. Good to be back around the curling rink. Good to chat to some fans, and certainly a lot of excitement in the air this year with the Olympics just around the corner, the trials coming up. I think we talked about it off air before, but there's just a little bit of a different feeling within all the teams and even the fans as well throughout the arena. Just a lot of buzz, a lot of anticipation, a lot of excitement. Some teams starting to play really well.
Yeah, for sure. Some teams making their mark on the season early, and I guess we can start there with the AMJ Masters and maybe the bigger news. Because Rachel Homan winning it's not news really anymore. I mean, must be nice to be Rachel Homan and no one even cares if you win. I mean, of course we do, and we will talk about it. But on the men's side, not only is it the first Canadian team to win a slam in over a calendar year, as we know, the Scottish boys, Mawat and White, dominated the slams last year. But Matt Dunstone getting his first slam win in 6 years at the Masters. Robbie, you were on the call. You were doing play-by-play and analyzing in the booth with me. So you saw a lot of games last week. What were you seeing out of Matt Dunstone? Did you feel like they were full value for the win? What did you see over the course of the week that was maybe a little different about this Matt Dunstone squad that got them over the hump?
Well, I think I'm going to echo what I just said. It's definitely a different year with more at stakes every time they play. Talked about it a lot on the broadcast, especially when these Canadian teams lock up. You know, there's some teams have we seen around the world, like, you know, the Scottish team, the Swedish teams, etc. They already know they're booked into the Olympics. They're going. But for these Canadian teams, they have to get through the trials. And that's not an easy task, as all curling fans know. So it's so important to be able to time when they peak and even to get a leg up on their fellow Canadian teams. So there was a couple instances where we'd see two Canadian teams play each other and just round robin, not that they're not big games, but still a round robin game. And it felt like a final. The intensity was high. The shot making was high. But Team Dunstone, one thing I noticed about them right from the get-go, and it's funny because I remember having a chat about this with my buddy here in PEI, Ryan Giddens, 2016 Brier participant. We were just chatting curling one time, and you know, we were asking about teams to watch for, and I said Dunstone. I said, this team has put a lot of work in. They sort of flown under the radar. You mentioned he hasn't won a slam in 6 years, but going back 6 years, because I still did work for the Grand Slams then, I was there. I was right beside them on the ice when they won. Matt Dunstone bawled like he had just won the Olympic gold. And what that said to me was these events mean so much to him. It's not just another Bonspiel. It's not just an event win. It's something that he cherishes. He really values as an athlete and as a player. And it really, really means a lot to him. And you could see that again when he won in Nisku. I was actually on the tier 2 final for the men's call. So I didn't see the moment from the booth when he did win. It did go to an extra. I was kind of on the corner of the ice, but seeing how much, once again, it meant to him, you know, that was pretty special. But all week, you could tell that team was just a little bit more dialed in, perhaps than regular. And let's not pretend that there's not one player on that team that's probably not a little bit more excited with those sweet wins. Would be EJ Herndon with all the shakeups last year. It's great to see him. EJ, for those who know him, just a class act, great guy. And he certainly landed on his feet on a team with back-to-back jacks. So, you know, I don't think we're going to say it's a dominating performance, but a hell of a performance from Team Dunstone. Certainly a well-deserved win.
Yeah, I think the first slam of the year, we always see teams shaking the rust off, even though we know for some of the teams, some of the European and Asian teams, their calendar has been full already. I think for some of the teams, just being on the broadcast, knowing it was like their 5th or 6th or even 7th event of the season. But there is something different about being in a slam, being on arena ice. And typically Matt Dunstone is one of those guys who's very candid about his own game. And I can remember talking to him last year, and even this year, they got eliminated in the Shorty. They didn't make the playoffs at the Shorty before the Slam. And he almost said it's like unfair to be a Canadian team at the start of the year because it's so hard to compete with these European teams where they start playing events in early to mid-August. Same with the Asian teams. We often have seen those European teams come out of the gate hot. But yeah, they seemed ready, and I feel like it's momentum from the Brier final. I think the Brier final can obviously go the other way. You're so disappointed you lost, and you think, oh geez, we were so close again. We didn't get the job done, and that kind of filters into the next season. But it seemed like the Brier final, they had only been together as a group for 4 or 5 months at that point. They make the Brier final. It just seems like that was a huge confidence booster for them, Robbie. And yeah, they just looked strong throughout the event. As you said, as Matt said himself on our podcast, they got a few breaks along the way, as any team does, to win. But Matt Dunstone, your champion. Ross White making it to the finals once again, couldn't get over the hump. But the Masters has been a great tournament to them. They've won it. They've made the finals in it twice, and they looked really good again this past week in London. A couple words about Ross White.
Oh, just a strong team, right? Start to finish. And I don't know how many times I can echo the cliche saying, well, a great team, but they live in the same country as Team Mowat. And, it's kind of like they're in their shadow. But I think they're breaking out of that shadow. Even though they didn't win last week, they've proved that they belong. And they had a big win over their fellow countrymen in Bruce Team Mowat, which is huge for them in terms of confidence. And I think that rivalry is one that's going to last for a long time. But Robin Bryden, in my opinion, is, if not the best, certainly top 2, top 3 thirds in the game right now. He's exceptional. He's got every shot in the book. There was one game I was calling during the round robin, and I forget who they were playing, but they didn't have the hammer. Things were not looking good. And Ross called a cold draw back 4 behind 2 staggered guards in the top 8, like just a 1 in 20 sort of thing. And Robin, just no hesitation, dropped it down with an outturn back 4, perfectly buried. They ended up stealing one that end. He's just kind of that rock solid player who has every shot in the books, but also is very, very dependable under pressure. And we've seen that time and time again. And I think Team White, they're not old. I don't know their exact age, but they're certainly not in the twilight years of their career. And I think if last year winning the Slam wasn't considered their true breakthrough, I think we're seeing it now. And they're going to be a team that is certainly going to be a force to reckon with. And the Scottish Curling Association or Federation, they're going to have a lot of tough decisions to make down the road.
Yeah, no question about it. And it seems like both the teams get along too. So you can easily imagine that those two teams are just going to stay together for the next quad. Sometimes, as we know, the Scottish Federation appoints the teams, they select the teams, and we've seen some of those shenanigans going on early this year, which we talked about the last time you and I got together with what's going on with Waddle's team and everything. But yeah, it's easy to see a world where those two teams just stay together and they just keep getting better. They keep making each other better. And yeah, it's definitely a scary proposition for Canadians. You could see a world in which they're 1-2 in the world. I mean, they're not too far off of that right now. So yeah, looking forward to that. You said it yourself. You were on the call for the Tier 2 men's final. Danny Casper winning his second Tier 2 event in 3 years, defeating the old hand, Kevin Cooey, finding his way through that Tier 2 field. Danny Casper took the win down. Tell us what you saw in that Tier 2 final from both sides, and what you like about Danny Casper.
Danny Casper, I got to know him last year in Charlottetown at the Hearing Life Tour Challenge, the first event of the season. I'd never met him before. He was just in the stands, and I was watching the game. I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday night. He was competing next door in the Tier 2, and I just sat with him for about 2 ends, and we just kind of shot the shit and chatted curling. He's quite young, but before the game, before the Tier 2 final, I was invited on with Devin Haru for the pregame show to just talk about my thoughts. I was going to be in the booth calling the game, what my early thoughts were. And it was a pretty cliche scenario. It was kind of youth versus experience. Kevin Cooey, This time was a little bit different in the tier 2. They played in a curling club, and all reports were it was quite straight. The conditions, they didn't quite have the movement that they were hoping for over there. And the ice, as we talked about in the arena, was quite swingy, and especially on that sheet D where they played with that big frost on the outside. So they knew there was going to be a lot of movement. So to me, it was all about two things. Number one, who's going to catch on to the ice first? And number two, if Danny Casper and his team could adapt to that big game scenario in a big arena setting in front of the big fans with a lot on the line. But I called it before. I said, they've won this event. We've seen them win this 2 years ago in Niagara Falls. So they're not going to be intimidated by the scenario. So my thoughts early on were, if Team Casper can settle in early, get a read on the ice, they're going to be a very tough team to beat. It really went back and forth. Both teams had their chances earlier on. But it was just Casper making the right times at right shots at the right times, I should say. And
right
that
times
team
at the right shots.
Right. That's where we're at now, John.
Yeah.
But it's I think that team has a really bright future. I said it when I saw them in Niagara Falls in that final.
Yeah.
And then when I was chatting to Danny last year, he was kind of telling me all about how much they train, how much the game means to them, and the opportunities they have. And he certainly showed it. He was cool as a cucumber out there, and not an easy task. I don't care how many times you've played in that game, but beating Kevin Cooey, who's an absolute legend in this game, he will go down as one of the greats. That's a tall task, and they certainly answered the call.
Yeah, I like Danny a lot. I interviewed him last week on this show. If you haven't listened to it, I would urge you to go check it out, because I think he's a name that fans maybe won't be super familiar with. Hasn't had that big breakthrough in the States yet. He made the finals last year, got there ahead of John Schuster, but lost to Corey Dropkin in that U.S. final last year. But they're all very tightly matched right now. Danny Casper is into the top 16 right now. We're not going to see him in Nisku, but I believe it's something like, I don't have the rankings right in front of me, but Dropkin's around 12th, Casper's 14th, and Schuster's 15th, I think. So
Yep.
Going into the trials, it's anyone's game. And Danny kind of said in that interview with me, like, we're not, just because we're young, we don't feel like we're an underdog or we're a dark horse or we're lucky to be there. Like, we're going in and we're expecting to win it. And it's his first trials. I love that mentality. He talked also on the interview with me about how he's been struggling with Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is it's a nerve disease. Basically, your immune system attacks your nerves, and he had trouble walking at times last year, couldn't get out of bed, and now is playing once again at the highest level. So yeah, love that team, and I do love their future. I think they're an interesting one. I think the U.S. is interesting in general. We'll talk about that as this year goes on, with who's going to be retiring and what those teams are going to look like. But yeah, again, it's a young team, a team that seems to like playing with each other. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that all heads next year. Okay, the women's side, we'll go through this one a little faster because, quite frankly, the storylines are just not as interesting.
No.
Rachel Homan defeats Silvana Tirinzoni in the final. Where have we heard that before? 3 out of the last 6 slams, that's been the final. Homan beat them in Nisku last year. Tirinzoni, of course, beat Homan at the AMJ Players, and now at the AMJ Masters, Homan gets that win back. They hoist, and on the tier 2 side, Ikue Kitazawa, Japanese team who we saw in several slams last year, got the tier 2 win. So we're going to see them back in the tier 1 slams once again. Almost feels like an Eunji Kim situation, Robbie. Remember when she fell down into the tier 2s and then won it, and then you never saw her in the tier 2 again? I feel like that's maybe the path we're on with Kitazawa, but I'll throw it to you just for a quick word on Rachel Homan continuing her dominance and Kitazawa getting back into the tier 1 picture.
Yeah, I remember Kitazawa last year. We saw her a couple times in the tier 1. Again, a great young team. I think the story is not so much on Kitazawa. The story is on curling in Japan.
Yeah.
And how much work is going in from these teams. We're seeing these new team names pop up. And, for us as Canadian, or at least myself as a Canadian fan, checking in on the scores when there's a national title or championship going on. And there's always seems to be a couple of teams that you don't recognize. And Kitazawa was one of those. And hearing them as an MC, I was calling the tier 1 final, so I didn't get to see much of the game. But I remember as the MC reading their names a few times, catching a couple of their games, and certainly a strong team to look for. And the other thing is, we kind of mentioned the White Mowat thing, but as we see more of those Japanese teams and Korean teams and teams from other regions come up, and they come up in numbers where there's 2 or 3 or 4 strong teams, it just makes everybody better. As Nick Solsky famously says quite often, high tides rise all boats. And I think we're certainly seeing that in Japan. And it's kind of a relief for them as well, to Kitazawa, just to get that off their back. Like, that's a big win. If you're traveling all the way from Japan to London, Ontario, you want to win. And
yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, you want to win. And so good for them. On the tier 1 side, it's just funny how, I think if you had asked 3 or 4 years ago, I mean, Homan was always a strong team, not what I'm trying to say, but if someone had have said, I'm going to predict this dynasty that this team Homan is going to go on, I think a lot of people would have thought you were a little crazy. It's mind blowing. And I'm not talking curling. I'm talking sports and in life. This team dominates. The Grand Slam of curling is the best in the world. What is it? 3 weeks before the start of the event. And every event now is being looked at as Team Homan's to lose. And truly, Homan's going to win unless something happens. And it was fun to watch that team, especially after the last 2 years. They've got so much attention. They got so much chatter about them, and that can certainly add pressure to anybody. They're human, and they've responded to it. What blew my mind too is I think they would admit this. I don't think it was their best weekend. They didn't seem like they were really even firing.
They could have easily lost the quarterfinal. Speaking of Japanese curling teams, Momoha Tabata had I wouldn't say an easy shot, but a shot she probably makes 7 out of 10 times to beat Rachel in the quarterfinal and missed it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And we saw it last year as well. She had a couple, I think it was semifinals against Kim, where Kim easily could have won. It was just an untimely miss. Rachel ended up taking that one. Same thing against Yoshimura last season, I believe, in the semifinals. Rachel just knows how to give herself chances to win, and she always seems to execute. Just a true dominating team.
Yeah.
That's all you can really say, like you said. And I'm not trying to, I know you had mentioned it, that it's kind of boring to talk about now, but that's all you can say. And I think as fans of the sport and people who've dedicated, a lot of time to the sport over their life, it's incredible to see.
I can distinctively remember back in my newsletter writing days, and now most of my writing is done for the Grand Slam of curling, but I had a newsletter, and I can remember the first year the team was together, they lost, if you remember, in the Scotties playoffs to Christina Black. Yep. And they didn't have a great Scotties, like the fact they were even in that eliminator game so early. And I can remember they had a pretty good year, and then they got knocked out by Christina Black. And I can remember people saying, oh, well, this is exactly what I thought. Rachel and Tracy are not a good mix. This team doesn't work. Emma needs to be third because she's been third forever for Rachel, blah, blah, blah. And I can remember writing in my newsletter that I didn't understand people writing a eulogy for the team. Now, of course, I'm not saying I was predicting this run they've been on. No one could have predicted this, but I can remember saying, they've had a good year. I don't understand what this rush is to bury this team in the ground. They had really good finishes at slams. I think they won one, or they made it to the final of one, and it looked like they were getting things together. And then of course, they go on this crazy run, and it's not to big up myself. It's more just to say that, even after 1 year of this team, people weren't sure about it. People weren't saying, oh, well, they've got something figured out. But remember, they had Rachel sweeping in that first year. Tracy was in the house. They made the move to put Rachel back in the house, and that just seemed to unlock everything for them. And they've been unbelievable. We're going to talk about them a little bit more in a second when we get to the points bet as well, so we don't have to belabor the point. Just one more thing on the Masters. We were both there. We got to see it firsthand. Mickey Lismore, the national coach for wheelchair curling, just wrote a great article about it on the Grand Slam of Curling website. If you haven't read that, you can check it out. Also a great video produced about Dennis Thiessen's retirement. But the first ever GSOC wheelchair invitational in the books, and Robbie, a quick word on that. It just seems like the event was an absolute hit for everybody, the players, the fans, Curling Canada, British curling, Italian curling. Just seems like it was a special thing.
Yeah, and I want to backtrack to my comments about Matt Dunstone and seeing how much, when I talked about how much that game means to them, and seeing how much when he did win that first one 6 years ago, and you could see the raw emotion. Well, that's kind of what it reminded me of after the wheelchair, the second final Canada Red, and seeing Thiessen out on the ice and just getting the standing ovation. I think it was after both games, actually. They got a full standing ovation from the crowd in London. And it was, you could see it in their face how special it was. It's about time. We've got so many athletes, who compete in wheelchair curling, who are so talented. They dedicate so much time to the sport. They travel so much. They put so much work into it. And shout out to Mick as well, who does a great job with that program as well, at least here in Canada. So it was the first time they got to play on that Grand Slam surface. They see it all the time. You could tell how special it was for them to be showcased on that final Sunday. It was a big crowd, especially for the first one. And it was just really, really cool to see. And I hope we see a lot more of it.
Yeah, I think we will. It certainly seems like it was a success on all fronts. Would not be surprised if that becomes an annual part of the slams, whether that's one slam like this year or maybe even multiple. Who knows? But yeah, very, very special. The impromptu singing of "O Canada" clearly left a lot of people with not dry eyes, we'll say. But yeah, it really seemed like it went off. There's also been videos going around. I think it's well known that after one of the night draws, the wheelchair teams hooked up with the able-bodied teams and they played some games together. It was Homan and White and Mowat and Epping were all out there playing with them. So it was really just special. You could tell what it meant to the program, to the players, and also what it meant to the slams too. It kind of was an integral part of. It felt like it was an integral part of this slam, and as you say, hopefully something moving forward. Now, I just wanted to give, before we get to the PointsBet, this is the first slam of the year now that the Broom rule changes have come in. And so I was asking teams all week, because I was curious. I think a lot of us have wondered, what does this all mean? Especially as fans, we're talking about foam density and how hard they are and what difference that makes to the sweeping and blah, blah, blah. So over the course of the week, I just had some casual chats and I talked to teams that use every Broom manufacturer, at least on the tier 1 side. Right now, we have teams using Hardline, Goldline, and Balance Plus. So I talked to players who are using all 3 manufacturers. Heard some varied things, Robbie. It sounds like it's maybe not fully solved, at least for now. I think what I sort of heard from one player was, after the summit, the feeling was that the foams that they have asked these teams to use are about 60 to 70% effective when compared to the old foams, the harder foams that teams were using last year that caused all the consternation. So again, I think there are still some teams who think that's too high. I think there is definitely teams who are saying behind the scenes that they'd love for them to be looked at again after this quad. Obviously, the summit that took place this year in Morris was sort of a patchwork, let's get through the Olympics type situation, type solve. And yeah, there are definitely teams who want to go back to the drawing board again after this year. Still some teams who think it's too hard. What I heard from some teams was that it's really what this foam is affected, how it affects the rock, the drag or the carry is less. So sweepers are feeling like across the board, Hardline, Goldline, Balance Plus, they're not getting the distance that they were getting out of the harder foam, which that was a complaint last year. That was one of the chief complaints, actually, when the new Balance Plus harder foam came on the market and then people started to compare it to the Hardline. People were realizing, like, we're getting 6 to 8 feet of drag out of these brooms, which teams are feeling like they're not getting anymore. So that's kind of the main thing. Other teams told me too, the ice in London was frosty, so they haven't necessarily had a chance to test it on perfect arena ice conditions. They thought because it was frosty, the brooms actually had more of an effect than they thought they might. But yeah, just something to keep an eye on moving forward. Just talking with all the teams, I thought it was interesting that they do think that they are less impactful, but they would still like to see maybe after the dust settles on this season, the Broomheads get maybe even just that little bit softer to bring in the element of shot making into the game, make it a little bit more of a percentage split. Okay, the PointsBet Invitational just happened in my hometown of Calgary. I was there. I went to a few draws, but the main thing before we get to the winners, we know it was a repeat of the AMJ Masters. Matt Dunstone winning on the men's side, Rachel Homan winning on the women's side, but it had a new format this year, Robbie. It was in the past 3 years had been a single elimination tournament, the Sweep 16, as they were calling it. This year, it went to almost more of a Grand Slam style format. 2 pools of 5. You played 4 round robin games, but the way that they sort of tried to duplicate the single elimination format was that it was only if you won your pool did you make it into the finals. So it was a sort of, if you lost one game, at least on the women's side, if you lost one game, you were out, because Corinne Brown, Rachel Homan both went 4-0 through the round robin. So it was just, you lost your round robin game to Homan or Brown, you were out. Did you like the new format? Did you watch any of it? Where were you this week with the PBI?
I caught some. I did catch some of it. I like the new format. I don't know if I'm going to get shit on or not for that, but I personally enjoyed it for 2 reasons. I think one as a fan, and one perhaps from the players' point of view. And I haven't talked to any players about this, so they might all completely disagree. But I think if you're, this is a PointsBet event. Like, I don't speak, cut me off if I'm wrong here, John, but from my understanding, it was kind of a sponsor saying, we want to hold this event. Let's do it. They came up with the Sweep 16. It happened.
Yep, 100%.
See, yeah.
Yeah, they said, we have money.
Right.
We want to give you the money, but if we're giving you the money, this is how we want the tournament to run.
Yeah, and they had a unique format with the single knockout format, which was fun to watch. As a fan, it was, every game was literally sudden death for one of the 2 teams. So that was kind of cool. But at the same time, if I was still playing, and I'm ranked number 9 or 10 in that field, I'm not sure if I'd want to travel to Edmonton, or for me being from the East Coast, or Saskatoon or Vancouver, like wherever that far, with a guarantee of 1 game, especially when the chances of me sneaking one off, Dunstone or Gushu.
Well, and the first year it was in Fredericton. So you were asking most of the teams to be going
right
a long ways across the country to get there.
Yeah. So I think as a player, I love the new format. And at the same time, I thought they did a good job, whether it was PointsBet or Curling Canada, of changing the format, coming up with something that works, but still kind of keeping that high stakes feel with the one team moving on to the final.
Right.
So it's not like you had a double berth. If you got into that 1-2 game, you could afford a loss. It was like, we literally have to win out our pool against the top, or 4 of the top 10 teams in Canada, other than us, whoever's in our pool, if that makes sense. So I thought it was a good compromise to offer the team some more games on great conditions. I think it was Mike Merklinger doing the ice, I believe.
It was, yep.
Fantastic ice. Calgary.
He might be the best for me.
Yeah, and just, I think too, being in Calgary, the humidity is certainly a lot less of a factor than it is in Southern Ontario. But it looked terrific. There's a lot of great shots being made. And going back to your brooms, it looked like there was your broom discussion. It looked like there was a lot of shots made using carving. Like, it seems like there was a lot of kind of those lightweight sort of hack weight sort of taps through holes being made. So maybe that's a conditions thing. I don't know. I'm certainly not an expert, but I liked it. I thought it was fun to watch. And also for the players, you look at a team like Corinne Brown, who makes the final. They're not on every Grand Slam. They're not going around. So they
went 0-4 in the tier 2 in London just the week before.
Right. But for teams like that, who are trying to break through, say McDonald on the men's side, Kate Cameron, Corinne Brown, it's a great chance for them to play on that big stage on quality conditions against the top teams. So I think in terms of a developmental event in Canada, it's a pretty cool event. And then also teams like sorry to cut you off, John, but like Team McIsaac, the U20 champs are there. I think there's just a lot of positive things going for it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they changed the format this year because they said in an Olympic year, most of these teams at the event are going to be in the trials or in the pre-trials. So
Yep.
we want to get them some more games against top competition on arena ice. So I agree. I thought the format change, the only thing is, especially coming a week after a Grand Slam, it just felt like, okay, it's just another Grand Slam, except there's no international teams there. So I thought the event lost a little bit of its mystique. Of course, I get it from a player perspective. If I'm a player, I'm the same. I wouldn't want to fly across the country to get my ass kicked and then have to go home. That's not very fun.
No.
So that part of it, I agree. Like from a player's perspective, I'm sure they liked it more. Just as a fan perspective, it didn't offer enough of a differentiating factor for me. I'll be curious to see if the event happens next year. We know that PointsBet had a 4-year contract with Curling Canada that has now been fulfilled with this PointsBet Invitational. So yeah, the attendance wasn't amazing across the years. In Fredericton, it did pretty well that first year. Then it was in Oakville, and it did very poorly from an attendance perspective. The last couple years in Calgary, it's been hit or miss. And again, Calgary's just had a lot of curling events. We had the Scotties in 2024. Then we had the PointsBet also in 2024. Now we have the 2025 PointsBet. The Women's Worlds in 2026 also coming here, all in the same building in the WinSport Arena. So yeah, I do wonder if it's coming back. So I think that might have even been part of the format change, is Curling Canada just saying, look, this event's going to be gone anyway, so let's just do it the way we want to do it this last year and get teams these extra games. But yeah, we'll see what happens, and we'll see if it doesn't come back, if Curling Canada looks to replace it with something else. Does the Continental Cup come back? Does the Canada Cup come back?
There we go. That's what I was waiting for.
Well, those are the two tournaments that have been run by Curling Canada in the past that no longer exist. Robbie, you seem to light up when I said that. Does that mean you would like to see one of those or both of those come back in lieu of this event?
Well, I don't know if it necessarily has to be called the Canada Cup, but for one, I loved the Canada Cup. It was kind of a sneak peek of the Brier early on. It kind of got you. I know the curling landscape is completely different than it was 20, 25 years ago when I just kind of started following the sport. But it was a fun concept. And I think, the discussion is certainly, not that Adal hasn't been around for the last 20 years, but the discussion will continue of, how does Canada send their representative to the World Championships, based on, I don't want to open that can of worms here, John. We all know
we're already 30 minutes in. We can't do a 4-hour podcast, unfortunately.
No. And when this podcast gets released, I can't have my phone die the battery because I get 197 notifications telling me I'm killing curling. But I just think it's a good chance for Curling Canada to bring that back for our Canadian teams, give them, a chance to showcase themselves on national television. It's good for their teams in terms of sponsorship. It's a great chance in terms to get quality, to play on quality ice conditions and just be showcased. It's just one more big event for the Canadian teams.
Yeah, so we'll see what they decide to do. I did just want to talk briefly about your sweeping comment as well. I think the teams do feel like even these softer foams can still carve the rocks quite well. And one thing I've heard about the hardline foams in particular is that the recreational foam that the teams are currently forced to use under the rules is actually bigger than the fabric. So if you're a fan listening to this, if you've never seen how a hardline head gets put together before, you have the foam and you have the plastic pieces that attach it to the broom shaft, and then you put a fabric cover over those. And what I've heard from some teams is that the foam is actually slightly bigger than the fabric. So when you jam it into the fabric's stretched over it pretty tight. And so it is still quite firm. And so I think it's just, you don't get as much drag because the drag comes from obviously the pressure that you can put on it. And the amount of pressure you can put on it, eventually something has to give, no matter how tight the fabric is. You got these big horses leaning on these brooms. At some point, the foam being softer is going to affect the carry. But with the carve, because you're not necessarily sweeping for distance and you're not necessarily putting all of your pressure on the broom to carve, or it's just a different stroke in general, I think hardline teams are still feeling like, and this is what I haven't heard from Goldline or BP teams about this because I'm not sure exactly the makeup of their head, but I did have a couple hardline players say that they felt the carve was pretty close to what they were getting out of it before. And maybe it was just because the fabric was slightly tighter. Anyway, that's all to say Matt Dunstone wins, gets into the final based on, sorry, we're going off on tangents here, but I thought it was important to note after you brought that up.
It reminds me of me putting a t-shirt on.
Yeah, Dunstone, Homan, Matt Dunstone gets into the final based on last stone draw. There was a 3-way tie in their pool between McEwen, McDonald, and Dunstone. They had all beaten each other. Dunny gets in, Brad Jacobs gets in, and then Rachel Homan faces off against Corinne Brown in the finals. I want to get to Nisku, so give me just a quick and dirty thoughts on the repeat wins for Homan and Dunny.
I think it's great for both teams. Homan, certainly no surprise, expected them to win, but for Dunstone, to win that Grand Slam, you saw how much it meant to him to come back and win right after another major event. Good for him. And I think going into the trials, they're going to be a team to really watch for.
Yeah, well said.
Going back to my point about development, McDonald with the win over Dunstone in the round robin, that's a big win for them as well. So shout out.
Yeah, I think that mix is working well for them. Jacques Gauthier taking over at third from Dallas Burgess. I think a lot of us were surprised. Dallas had been with Jordan for the last few years, went to a few Canadian juniors together. I think they've been so good. We saw them get into a tier 1 slam last year, not even by winning tier 2. Like they got direct entry into the tier 1 in Guelph there. They played well. I think people saw that and they saw a team that, pardon me, was functioning at a pretty high level, and they were still willing to make a change and wanting to get themselves over the hump. And bringing in a guy like Jacques Gauthier, world junior champion, been to the Brier as a skip, feels like a smart move. And I like the patience from Jacques too. He kind of got booted off that Kevin Cooey team halfway through the year. Tough situation to be put in, but he was patient. He found a mix with some good young players, and definitely an exciting team. One we'll be keeping an eye on as we head into the rest of the season. They head to the pre-trials in just a couple weeks in Nova Scotia here. Pardon me, sorry. But now, without further ado, we are at the Co-op Tour Challenge coming up in Nisku in just about a few days as you listen to this. We get to the Co-op Tour Challenge in Nisku. And Robbie, very excited to be back in the Silent Ice Center. Beautiful building. We talked about it before. Loved being there last year, but talked to the competition committee, and I'm able to give a scoop to the fans. We've got a few more rule changes coming down the pipe for the Tour Challenge. As we know, this is going to be an experimental year for the Grand Slams. The points kind of don't matter. Everybody's the Olympic trials, the Olympic berths are all sort of sorted out at this point. So the slams feel like it's a great year to experiment with different formats, different rules. The big one that's coming in for Nisku, one that I saw at the Best of the West last year when I was commentating that event, 1 blank per team per game is official. I talked about it with Matt Dunstone last week, but that is going to officially come into play in Nisku. So for the fans who maybe didn't listen to that Matt interview or don't know what I'm saying, basically each team is allowed 1 blank per game where they can keep the hammer afterwards. And then if they blank another end, the hammer would flip. So let's say the first end, your opposition scores, you get the hammer for the first time. In the second end, you end up blanking it. Maybe you score in the third end, but later in the game, you blank the 6th end. Then the other team would get the hammer in the 7th. So Robbie, I'll throw it to you first. Your thoughts on 1 blank per team per game.
I love it. And I don't think it's that I even have a problem with blanks. I've talked about that many times before. Mm-hmm. Mark Kennedy said last year, if 2 teams come out and they make a center guard, draw around, freeze, one team decides it's not looking good for them, and they make 2 double run backs in a row or something and force the blank, that's still great curling and great shot making. So it's not that I'm anti-blank, but I do think that curling, anything they can do to spice it up a little bit, perhaps draw some more interest, make the teams think a little bit differently, it's a good thing, in my opinion. It's something for entertainment purposes that even you and I in the booth can tee up. When are they going to try it? Are they going to try to, use their blank this one? Will they take one, save it for later? It adds a little bit of an element of surprise and excitement. But I think where we're really going to notice it is in the finals, especially on the men's side. How many times do you see a men's final, whether, especially in the Brier, I actually notice it, but even in a Grand Slam, when two teams will go out very, very, very defensive, either team looking to make the first move, and it seems like you're, in the fourth end and it's 2-1 or 1-0 sort of thing, bit of a snoozer. So I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to create, just certainly some more thinking for each team. It's going to force them to adjust their game plan. And in my opinion, it's fun. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, we saw it at the Best of the West last year. Matt, and he runs a great event. Matt and Dustin Mickish and Rylan Kleider run an event every year in Saskatoon for the U30 teams in Canada. I've been commentating it from the beginning. This was the first year we tried it out, and I loved it. Like, to me, and I'm with you, like you said, we've talked about this before. I'm not really an anti-blank guy. I think the type of blank we're trying to eliminate is the mutually agreed upon, let's just run them up and down the sheet. Who cares? I think that's the blank that we're trying to eliminate, or even an early blow up, right? No one wants to see multiple hits in a row to an open house, and you do see that sometimes. Like you said, it could be a great setup. It could be the first 6 or even 8 rocks of an end are all thrown really, really well. And then the 9th rock, stuff gets blown up, and then by rock 10 we have 7 rocks in a row that are just kind of open hits. All right, let's run them up and down and get them out. And those are the blanks we're trying to eliminate, and I think this rule does that. We saw it at the Best of the West. Matt talked about it when I interviewed him last week, but I think over the course of the entire Best of the West event, and that's like a full 4-day event, tons of teams, lots of games being played, like it's pool play, then it's a full playoffs. We saw 10 blanks in the whole event, I think, because what happens is teams want to save their blank, because you never want to give away the hammer for free in the later half of the game, right? Like because sometimes that does happen where your only good shot is a shot to blank, right? Like maybe it's like a pick, like they just got it halfway around a guard, or your only good shot as a skip is to blank. If that's happening in the 6th or 7th end, you never want that to be flipping the hammer. And so what we saw is we saw teams getting more aggressive early because they didn't want it to make sense for them to blank early on in the first half of the game. And then what often happens is you just don't end up using your blank. Like, you save it because you want to save it for a rainy day, but then the storm never comes and you just never end up using it. And so, yeah, we saw teams play really different strategies. We saw teams take one on purpose. Like, if, the end didn't get set up the way they wanted it to, and they would have blanked in the first end, you might see them nose and just take one to keep that one blank for later in the game. It just introduces a different element of strategy, which I think is really good. I think it's, the game is being played at such a high level now that you actually do want to throw these little wrinkles, these little wrenches in the gears. You want the teams to be thinking about things differently. So I really liked that. And yeah, I just think it solves a lot of the quote unquote problems that we have with blanks, in my opinion. So I'm really looking forward. I mean, the Best of the West is a great tournament, make no mistake, but it's not the Grand Slams. It's not the top 16 teams in the world going at it. So I'll be very curious to see how the top teams approach it. But on its face, I loved it. Loved the rule change. Really looking forward to it in Nisku. I think the fans are going to really like it. Okay, we've got a couple. These are sort of like, I would say, smaller rule changes, so we'll just go through them quickly. But this one maybe deserves a little bit more of a chat. So we saw last year, the Slams teams got 33 minutes of thinking time. Then the team showed up in London. That number had dissipated down to 31. Nisku, it's going down a further minute. 30 minutes of thinking time. Teams will still get 2 90-second timeouts, but we're down to 30 minutes. Robbie, the time is rapidly coming off the clock.
I love it. Literally, I think when I saw the 33-31, I was like, ooh, that's a big jump. But now we're down to 30. I think that's going to make a big difference. I think there's a lot of times where there's so much discussion happening, and it's just kind of, it's hard for me to sit here and try to criticize teams for doing that, because that's the way they operate. But even me, just, even coming from the entertainment world and just sitting here and just saying, man, this is so boring. Like, just kind of get it on. I think it's going to encourage a lot faster play, especially at early on in ends. And I think it's going to have to force teams to adjust and make a new game plan, have some maybe pre-planned scenarios on, what they're going to do in certain situations, so they're not burning that time. But then even there was, I think it was the tier 2 final. It was the men's, it was Kui and Casper. It was, bang, 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 bang. First 4 ends. I think Kui had like 21 minutes left after 4 ends, which is unheard of. But then it was the game got a lot messier in the 5th. And I think he burned something like 7.5 minutes in that end.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the time that we kept, saying wasn't an issue, it was a big issue. And that can just add to the game. It can add to the way a team operates, but it also adds to the drama and the entertainment value for it. So I think it's a great thing. As you mentioned, it's the perfect year to try these things, and I don't think fans will ever complain.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it was one thing we really noticed in the booth too. Like, it went down to 31 minutes and we were still getting to the 6th, 7th, 8th ends, and teams had tons of time left on the clock. They'd have 10 minutes left with 2 full timeouts. Like, it was noticeable, because I thought too the same as you. And I think most teams would think, wow, you took 2 minutes off our clock, we're screwed. This is going to be so hard, And then, when you actually see it in practice and you go, no, well, you had tons of time left. You feel like we could take another minute off of there. So, I like that too. And I agree with you. And I agree with, like, Langer said that when I had him on the pod and interviewed him. He said, like, look, when the time gets quicker, there's more mistakes. And he's like, we're not trying to create that. We're not trying to say, hey, we want teams to screw up. But if that's kind of a little bit of a side effect, that maybe teams, misses are exciting, whether the teams like it or not. So that's good. The final 2 rule changes, I don't think we need to talk about these, but we're just announcing them for the sake of the fans being aware of what's going on in Nisku. They are keeping the shootout, so no extra ends in round robin play. Shootout is still in play. It's still going to have the same point system: 3 points for a win in regulation, 2 points for a shootout win, 1 point for a shootout loss, 0 for a loss in regulation. But the only rule change for the shootout now is if both teams cover the pin on their first shot, instead of going to a shot with no sweeping, it's going to a second shooter. So you have to pick a different shooter on your team. Sweeping will still be allowed. And so on and so forth. So then if the second shooters both cover the pin, then you go to a third shooter, etc. And then the other thing is the crossovers. Last event in London, we didn't do the crossovers until 3 games in pool play were completed. That's changing in Nisku. The crossovers are set, but in the past, Robbie, the crossovers have always been the game on Friday. This year, the crossovers can happen at any point during the week. So they're trying to make the draws as exciting as possible for fans, making sure you're getting a marquee matchup at least one anytime you come to the Silent Ice Center. So the crossover games can be even your first game of the event if it makes sense to get 2 good teams playing each other at the Silent Ice Center in Nisku. Tickets still available, by the way, gsoctickets.com. Okay, Robbie, we got to get out of here quick. But the Nisku field came out a little bit of an interesting factor on the men's side. The Pan-Continental Championships start on Monday in Minnesota, which means that the men's practice is Sunday, and that would also be the same day as the finals in Nisku. And so Brad Jacobs, John Schuster, and Xiaoming Xu are all missing out on the Tour Challenge due to the Pan-Continental. Unfortunate for those 3 teams, especially for Schuster. They were caught in the Tier 2 back in London. They were back in the Tier 1 mix here at Nisku, but all those teams have to miss. Just an unfortunate circumstance with the Olympic calendar compressing everything. But your thoughts on missing some of the big boys in Nisku?
Oh, I was going to echo exactly what you said. It's an Olympic year. There's only so many weekends in the year, and these events need to take place. It is unfortunate, especially a team like, excuse me, a team like Jacobs, and I'm talking as a fan, and as, someone who has worked in the event promotions, obviously Brett, Ben, and Mark being from Alberta, Mark from Edmonton. I think that's a big loss for the event. A lot of hometown fans would have liked to come out and see him, but I'm sure, and I don't know this, so I don't want to speculate, but I'm sure when you win the Brier, there's some duties that you do have to fulfill, the Pan-Continental being one of them. So it's unfortunate in my opinion, but you know what? The Grand Slam, World Curling Canada, they get together and they chat about these things and scheduling, and there's only so many weekends in a year where they can do everything. So kind of one of those things that sucks, but it had to be done.
Yeah, agreed. And we won't see that affect the women's side. The women's play in the PanCon doesn't start until Tuesday, so their practice is on Monday. So therefore, the teams who are in the Pan-Continental, Rachel Homan, Satsuki Fujisawa for Japan, we will be seeing them. Rue Wong electing to skip Nisku. So for them, perhaps just part of their travel schedule, however it worked out. They could play. They declined. But yeah, we will see Homan and Fujisawa in the field in Nisku. Okay, speaking of the Tour Challenge, Robbie, we will finish off here. I will say you had a pretty good run predicting the teams, the winners in London. So let's work your magic again here in Nisku. Who do you got winning on both sides of the sheet? And maybe give us a dark horse or two. We know that some teams have snuck in to Nisku. Kyle Waddle will be there. Kevin Cooey got the sponsor exemption. Who do you think's going to win? Who are some teams you're watching in Nisku?
I'm going to take two finalists and a dark horse. So two names and a dark horse on each side. On the women's, this might shock you, but I'm going to take Rachel Homan.
What? She's been in 6 straight Grand Slam finals. So,
and I'm going to take her playing Gim in the finals.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Gim has been sort of a big time semifinal. A lot of semifinals for Gim over the last year.
And they just look like they're on the right trajectory. They're starting to play well.
Yeah.
Good team. And my dark horse on the women's side, you ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
Carrie Einarson. I think Einarson, for the first time in a long time, she has her lineup sort of set. She's had some time to really work out some kinks in the lineup.
Yep. Yeah, they weren't great in London. PointsBet, they started with a 13-5 loss to Corinne Brown.
Hey, I'm calling it. This is Carrie's comeback tour starting in Nisku.
Okay.
And you know what? Hell of a job in the broadcast booth as well, Carrie. Great job.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She's always fun to have on the call. Yeah, you're right. We have seen Shannon Burchard is back, looks healthy. She did skip their final round robin game in the PointsBet. Kristen Karwacki getting into the lineup for that one. It didn't matter. Corinne Brown at that point had already clinched a spot in the final, so probably just a case of resting. Shannon, don't want to overdo it with the knee, but I haven't talked to Shannon. I'll have to make a point of doing that in Nisku, but just based on the fact that we've seen her play every game so far, seems like it's doing well. Her knee, she's throwing well. Peels look strong. So yeah, I think seems like they're all good. And yeah, as you said, their lineup is set. Kristen Karwacki set to be the alternate for the entire season. Carly Burgess at lead. Okay, men's side.
So now this might surprise you as well. Okay, but my first team I'm going to pick, Mowat.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
for the win.
Very, very shocking.
And now to spice things up, I'm calling an all-Scottish final.
Okay, you think Ross White's getting back there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I think he's getting back to the final. And in my dark horse pick.
Yep.
And I can't believe I'm going to say these words out loud in terms of dark horse. But my dark horse, Team Gushue.
Okay. So again, similar to Einarson.
Exactly.
Been a bad start to the year for Gushue. Went 1-3 in London. Didn't look amazing at the PointsBet either. But you're thinking this is where he gets the train back on the tracks.
He's Brad friggin' Gushue, man. The train is not going to stay off for very long. And I think just like Einarson, there's too much talent on that team. If you could look through the lineup and just say, Jeff Walker's the lead, Brendan Botcher throws second, Mark Nichols throws third, Brad Gushue throws the last ones, you're going to think that team wins a lot of games. And sometimes with a couple of, poor results in a row, it's easy to forget about that. And I think this is the one where Brad really comes out and starts to play well, especially with the trials getting closer. That's my
There you go. You
prediction.
heard it here first. Robbie Doherty picking Brad Gajou and Carrie Anderson as his dark horses. 10 national championships between them. But no, you're right. Definitely two teams that seem like they're struggling a little bit to get their feet under them in this early season. And great picks. Can't wait to see how it all comes off in Nisku. Robbie and I will both be there. Hopefully you will be too if you're anywhere in the area. As we said, the Silent Ice Center, unbelievable, great place. Join us, gsoctickets.com. I'm also going to be launching my book in Nisku. We're going to do a little book launch event. My book comes out October 14th, which is when we will be in Nisku. You can pre-order my book. It's called Curling Rocks, anywhere you get your books.
Already did it, John.
Thank you, buddy, and I appreciate that.
To it.
That's very kind of you. And if you are in Nisku or the Edmonton area for the Slam, I will be doing a Q&A at the Edmonton Lit Fest. So that'll be on Friday night at the Mud Art Theater at 7 p.m. on Friday. That is October the 18th. So hopefully I will see you there. But that's it. Broom Brothers, another one in the can. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to see a video of this episode, you want to see Robbie and I's beautiful faces as we discuss all these curling events, check us out on YouTube. Hit the follow button, hit the subscribe button. Subscribe to this podcast as well. That really helps us in the numbers side of things. You can also follow us on any social media platforms. We're just at the Broom Brothers. Thank you so much for tuning in. For Robbie, I'm John. We'll see you back here very soon. Have a great week. Goodbye.
Peace.